My stepdaughters called me the extra man and said they wanted to go back to their dad. I helped them pack, handed over the bills, and dropped them at his door. Now he knows the real price of his past. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. When I met Christina, I wasn't looking for a new life, just a little peace. Peace from the noise, the exhaustion, the quiet ache that comes after too many years of solitude and work. She came into my world like a reprieve, warm eyes, careful laughter. The kind of woman who had already been broken once but carried her scars with elegance. She was recently divorced, living with her 2 daughters, Olivia and Mia, 15 and 13. Their father, Paul, was a rumor that still walked among them. He lived a few towns over, showing up on birthdays with perfume and gadgets. His wallet performing the love his heart no longer could. The girls adored him for it. I was the opposite. Steady, predictable, the kind of man who keeps the lights on but never buys flowers. When Christina and I started seeing each other, I thought it might be temporary. 2 lonely people patching over old wounds. But she had a way of turning quiet evenings into something almost holy. Coffee in the kitchen before sunrise. The sound of her humming when she thought I wasn't listening. She talked about wanting stability, a future, a place where her daughters could feel safe again. I had a house then, modest, solid, built with the kind of money that comes from long shifts and little joy. For the first time in years, the place didn't feel empty. I let myself believe I could give them the home they needed. When the girls came over the first few weekends, they were polite, reserved. They called me Mr. David at first, then just David. I didn't push. I knew enough about divorce to understand that every new face feels like a betrayal to children who still believe their parents might find their way back to each other. I made space for that illusion. I bought extra towels, new bedsheets, stocked the fridge with the snacks Christina said they liked. I wanted them to see that this wasn't invasion, it was offering. A year later, Christina and I got married in a small ceremony behind the house. It was late spring, soft wind, cheap wine. A few friends standing in the yard while the girls wore matching dresses and forced smiles. I thought their discomfort was just the awkwardness of change. I told myself love could be built brick by brick, the way you build trust or a house. It wasn't true, but I didn't know that yet. When they moved in, the air changed. Subtle at first. The way the girls stopped greeting me when I came home, how they kept to their rooms, their laughter muffled behind doors I bought and painted myself. At dinner, they talked over me, traded glances, giggled about inside jokes that excluded me completely. I'd ask simple questions. How was school? How was practice? And get one-word replies. Sometimes not even that. Christina said it was just adolescence. Give them time, she told me, her hand brushing my arm. They'll come around. So I gave them time. I gave them everything. I paid the mortgage, their school fees, the insurance, new phones, new clothes, orthodontist visits, birthdays, vacations. I watched my savings drain into their comfort and told myself that patience was the price of belonging. I drove them to rehearsals, waited outside malls, stayed up fixing things around the house they never noticed. I believed that one day consistency would mean something, that maybe they'd see what I was trying to build. For a while, I convinced myself it was working. We had dinners together. We watched movies on weekends. There was even a summer trip, the 4 of us at the coast, sunburned and smiling for pictures that looked like happiness. For a brief time, I thought we were becoming something whole. But illusions are expensive, and I had already paid too much for mine. It began with small things. The way they started referring to me indirectly, him, he, that guy. Not cruel at first, but distant. Can he drive us? Did he already eat? Felt like a small cut, nothing fatal. But small cuts don't heal when they come every day. They accumulate until one morning you wake up bleeding from nowhere. I remember one night in particular. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't soothe but suffocates. I was passing by Olivia's room, on my way to shut off the kitchen light. The door was almost closed, and I heard her voice, soft, conspiratorial. "He's not family," she whispered to Mia. "Just an extra person in the house." They laughed, that cruel, careless laugh teenagers use when they still think words don't linger. I stopped in the hallway, frozen. It was such a small sentence, so simple, but it cracked something in me. I realized then that I had been financing my own invisibility, paying for dinners where I wasn't invited to speak, buying gifts for girls who looked through me, keeping alive a home where I was little more than a background figure in someone else's story. I didn't confront them, not that night. I just stood there, staring at the thin line of light beneath their door, listening to their laughter dissolve into the dark. There are moments in a man's life when he understands that the war is already lost, that all that's left is to retreat with what little dignity remains. But retreating from your own home feels like exile. Christina noticed the change in me but didn't ask. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she was afraid of confirming what I'd discovered, that I was the outsider she had convinced herself she could fit into a family that didn't want me. She would place her hand on my chest sometimes and say, "They'll grow out of it." And I'd nod, even though I knew people don't grow out of contempt. They grow into it. Weeks passed. I started staying late at work, finding excuses not to come home for dinner. I ate alone in my car sometimes. Takeout boxes, the sound of rain on the windshield, my reflection staring back at me from the dark window. I picture them at home, laughing, talking, maybe even happy. And I wondered if I was the disturbance they were always trying to erase. Once, on a Sunday morning, I found the family photo we took at the wedding turned face down on the mantel. No one admitted doing it. "It must have fallen," Mia said, her tone flat. But the frame was still upright, the glass unbroken. It hadn't fallen. It had been placed that way, quietly, deliberately, a symbolic gesture that said more than any argument ever could. I started to count the ways I no longer belonged, the way they waited for Christina to repeat my instructions before following them, the way they said Mom's house even though the deed bore my name, the way they never included me in stories that began with we. It became clear that I was not part of we. I was the invisible margin, the quiet funding beneath their comfort. I told myself this was normal, that teenagers were cruel without realizing it, that maybe one day they'd wake up and see who had been there when their father wasn't. But truth doesn't bloom from absence. It rots in it. The more Paul vanished, the more I became his shadow. The girls measured me against the ghost of a man who never had to live with their disappointment. He could appear once a month, smile, and vanish again, leaving me to bear the resentment that came in the silence after. Sometimes Christina would bring him up casually as if testing me. "Paul said he might take them to the lake next weekend," she'd say, not meeting my eyes. I'd nod. "That's good. They should see him." Inside, it felt like swallowing glass, because for all his absence, he still owned their love. I had presence, but presence, it turns out, is the least romantic form of devotion. Still, I kept going, paid the bills, fixed the leaks, smiled through gritted teeth at dinner. But every kindness felt transactional. Every act of care weighed against the ledger of their indifference. And slowly, something in me began to close. It's strange how silence can shape a man, how it can harden him more efficiently than hatred ever could. I started speaking less, not out of anger but fatigue. I began to feel like a tenant in my own home, paying rent with affection that no one asked for. Then one night, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Just a man standing alone in a house filled with other people's laughter. I didn't recognize him. There was no malice in my heart, no rage. Only the dull understanding that I had built a life where love was charity and gratitude was extinct. And in that moment, I understood what I truly was. Not a husband, not a father, just an extra person in the house. It happened on Mia's birthday. I had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The restaurant reservation, the decorations, the cake with her favorite frosting, even the laptop I knew she'd been secretly scrolling through online. I told myself this would be the night things shifted, the night I'd finally earn the kind of recognition that doesn't come from money but from being seen. Maybe a thank you, maybe just a look that said I matter here. The restaurant was one of those bright, glass-walled places where everyone pretends to be happy. I remember the sound, silverware clinking, the soft echo of laughter, the smell of expensive perfume that didn't belong to us. The four of us sat together. Christina glowing under the warm lights, Olivia distracted by her phone, Mia in a new dress that I had paid for. It was supposed to be a celebration, a bridge back toward something resembling family. When the waiter came to our table, smiling too widely, he looked at Mia and said, "You must be proud of your dad. He went all out tonight." I saw her eyes flick toward me. For a fraction of a second, there was hesitation, maybe confusion. Then she laughed. Sharp, deliberate, the kind of laugh people use to wound without appearing cruel. "He's not my father," she said. "He just lives with us." The table erupted in laughter. Even Olivia joined in. Christina pressed her lips together, trying not to smile, as if the moment were harmless. A teenager's joke, nothing more. But the sound of their laughter cut through me like glass. The waiter chuckled awkwardly and walked away, leaving me sitting there, a ghost holding a gift bag, pretending I hadn't just been erased in public. I didn't say a word. Not during the meal, not afterward. I smiled when expected, nodded at small talk, and signed the check, $238, plus tip. The waiter thanked me with a kind of pity I could feel in my bones. On the drive home, no one spoke. The silence was merciful. That night, when the house had gone still, Christina came to our bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing her hair, her reflection split between two mirrors. "Don't take it personally," she said without looking at me. "They just miss Paul." It wasn't the first time she'd said that, but something about hearing it that night, after everything, settled into me like frost. I stared at her and realized that she meant it. In her eyes, I was a placeholder, a functional body who paid the bills, kept the car running, and absorbed the contempt so her daughters could keep loving the ghost who had abandoned them. I nodded, said nothing, but inside something final clicked into place. The next morning, before the sun rose, I made coffee and sat at the dining table with my laptop. I opened the folders: bills, tuition statements, insurance payments, receipts for gifts, for repairs, for every expense that had kept this house alive. Line after line of evidence. A decade of devotion reduced to numbers. School tuition, $1,200 a month. Insurance, $300. Phone plans, $180. Dance lessons, medical fees, vacations, birthdays. Over 5 years. More than $100,000 spent on people who called me him. I printed every receipt, each page sliding out of the printer with mechanical calm. The sound was oddly satisfying, the rhythm of clarity. I stacked the pages into a folder and wrote across the front: family expenses, invoice for Paul. Then I went to the girls' rooms. I didn't touch anything of theirs, didn't break or throw or shout. I simply folded their clothes neatly, the way Christina liked, and placed them into boxes, each one labeled carefully with their names. It wasn't cruelty. It was accounting, a balancing of debts long overdue. When Christina came down later that morning, she found me sealing the last box. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice small, uncertain. "Cleaning up," I said. She laughed once. The nervous, brittle laugh of someone trying to delay understanding. "You're being dramatic." "Maybe." I looked at her then, really looked, and saw that she didn't see me at all. Not the years, not the work, not the quiet sacrifices. I was a utility disguised as a man. "I'm returning what was never mine," I said softly. She frowned, half confused, half afraid. "What does that mean?" But I didn't answer. Some truths don't need to be said twice. That evening, I loaded the boxes into the back of my truck. The air was heavy with the smell of rain. I drove the familiar route to Paul's address. The small, neat house on a quiet street where nothing ever really happens. He opened the door wearing a silk robe, a mug of coffee in one hand, his expression shifting from surprise to suspicion. "David," he said slowly, like he was trying to remember where he knew me from. I nodded toward the boxes. "You wanted to be the father," I said. "Here's your bill, and your daughters are waiting." He blinked, unsure if it was a joke. "What is this?" "5 years of your absence," I said, "all itemized." He started to protest, but I placed the folder on his porch, right beside the boxes, and turned to leave. His voice followed me down the steps. "You can't just walk away like that." I paused, looked back once. I'm not walking away, I said. I'm returning what was never mine. Then I left. On the drive home, the rain came down in sheets, drumming on the windshield like a final applause. For the first time in years, I felt no weight on my chest. Just a strange, hollow calm. The kind that comes after every battle worth losing. An hour later, Christina called. Her voice was trembling with fury. "You've destroyed the family," she screamed. I listened to her rage, her accusations, her rehearsed disbelief. Then I asked one question, "What family?" She went silent, and I hung up. The girls didn't call that night or the next. For a moment, I thought maybe Paul had taken it all in stride, played the hero for them one more time. But reality doesn't spare men like him for long. 2 days later, the phone rang again. Christina, her tone stripped of anger, replaced by panic. "Paul can't handle it," she said. "He doesn't have the money. The school's calling. The phone lines are suspended. The insurance." "I'm aware," I interrupted. "Please," she whispered. "Just help, at least temporarily." "The girls." "The girls," I said. "You mean the ones who said I was just an extra person in the house?" Silence. Then a broken, fragile exhale. "Please." I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty, but disbelief. "Let him finally learn the cost of his promises," I said, and ended the call. 3 days later, Mia showed up at my door. No phone, no makeup, no smile. The rain had returned, soaking her hair to her shoulders. She stood there shivering, her voice small and soft. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what I said." I looked at her. This child who wasn't mine but who had lived under my roof, eaten my food, spent my money, and never once called me what she called him. For a moment, I wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but something in me had already hardened past repair. "You were the only one who actually cared," she said quietly. I didn't reply. I just stepped aside, let her in, made her dinner. She ate in silence. When she was done, I walked her to the door. The rain had stopped by then. "Go home," I said. She nodded. "Will you ever come back?" I didn't answer. Some questions don't deserve mercy. When the door closed behind her, I realized something simple and devastating. I had given everything: time, money, love, forgiveness, and in return, I had bought only the right to be forgotten. That night, I burned the last copy of the family photo. The smoke curled upward, carrying with it 5 years of illusion. And in the silence that followed, I finally understood what freedom really costs. 2 days after I left those boxes on Paul's porch, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Christina's number, then Olivia's, then unknown numbers that I knew belonged to her friends or relatives sent to do what she couldn't: shame me back into obedience. I didn't answer. I sat in the garage instead, listening to the ticking of the truck engine as it cooled, the smell of wet cardboard and motor oil clinging to the air. The quiet felt clean, earned. For years I'd been surrounded by noise that never included me. Now the silence was mine. When Christina finally came in person, she was shaking. I heard her car door slam, the quick footsteps up the porch, the key she still had scraping in the lock. She stormed into the living room, eyes wild, hair soaked from the rain. "Where are they?" she demanded. "Where did you take them?" I didn't look up from the papers spread across the table. "Their fathers." Her voice cracked between rage and fear. "You had no right to do that." I set down my pen and met her eyes. "You all told me I had no rights. I finally believed you." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. For a moment, she looked small. A woman who realized too late that her safety net was woven from someone else's patience. Then she recovered and spat the words like poison. "You're cruel. They're children." "No," I said quietly. "They're investments with no returns." She left without another word. When the door closed, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The house echoed. Empty chairs, half-cleaned plates, photographs still on the walls like remnants of someone else's life. I walked through each room slowly, touching the things I'd built or bought, and realized they no longer belonged to me because they had never been wanted from me, only taken. That night I slept for 12 hours. No dreams, no shouts, no footsteps in the hallway. When I woke, the air felt lighter, as if the walls had been holding their breath until the house emptied. I made coffee, stood by the window, and waited for the world to notice their loss. It didn't take long. That afternoon Christina called again. Her voice was thin, exhausted. "He can't handle them," she said. "Paul. He has no money, no patience. The girls hate it there. Please just help for a few weeks." "I helped for 5 years," I said. "You called it love when it was convenience. Now call it what it is, debt." She started to cry. I ended the call. Some tears you earn. Hers were collateral. That evening a car pulled into the driveway. Through the rain-streaked window I saw Paul step out, the same man who had opened his door 2 days earlier in silk and indifference. Now his face was drawn, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness. He knocked once, polite, performative. I opened the door and let him stand on the threshold where I'd stood before. "This is insane," he said. "You can't just dump your family on my porch." "They're not my family," I replied. "They told me so themselves." He rubbed his temples. "Listen, I can't afford all this stuff. The schools, the phones, the insurance." "I know," I said. "That's why you let me pay for so long." For a moment his mask slipped. Behind the charm and cheap cologne was a man terrified of responsibility. He looked past me into the house, as if searching for Christina, for some moderate voice that might undo this stalemate. But she wasn't there. Only me, the man who had stopped begging to be understood. "I'll send the boxes back," he said finally. "I'm not taking them." "You already did," I said. "Every birthday, every vacation, every lie that made them believe you still cared. You took them then. Now you just get to pay the balance." He stared at me, speechless, then turned and left without another word. I watched his taillights fade into the mist, 2 red dots sinking into nothing. For the next 3 days I heard nothing. Then, on the 4th night, a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, Mia stood there, a shadow of herself. Her hair was damp, her eyes red. She held her phone in her hand like a broken compass. "Mom said you won't talk to her," she whispered. "Dad says he can't afford us. We don't know what to do." I felt something twist inside me. Not pity, not anger, just the memory of what I'd once wanted from them. Acknowledgement. "I told you what to do," I said gently. "Grow up." Her lips trembled. "I'm sorry. About what I said. About the restaurant." I nodded. She waited for me to say something else, something forgiving, but there was nothing left to give. The tank was empty. I let her in, made her a meal. She ate slowly, barely looking up. When she was done, I walked her to the door. "Tell your mother you're safe," I said. "And tell your father the bills are still waiting." She hesitated. "Will you ever forgive us?" I looked past her into the rain. "Forgiveness is for family," I said. "Remember what you called me." She nodded, a small, broken motion, and walked away. I stood in the doorway until the sound of her footsteps disappeared into the wet dark. That night the phone buzzed again and again. Texts, voicemails, pleas from Christina that blurred into one long wail. "You're tearing us apart, David. Please. The girls need you." I didn't reply. I'd been needed only as a wallet, a chauffeur, a repairman. Now they needed what I couldn't sell them. Dignity, responsibility, truth. Days passed. Then a week. I heard rumors through neighbors. Paul had returned the boxes, dumped them at Christina's door this time. The girls were staying with her again. But the phones were cut off, the insurance canceled, school threatening to suspend them for unpaid tuition. It was the slow collapse of a house built on borrowed hands. One evening, I drove past their street without meaning to. The lights were out except for a flicker in the kitchen window. Through the glass, I saw Christina alone at the table, head in her hands, papers scattered around her. I should have felt something: victory, revenge, relief, but all I felt was emptiness. There is no triumph in being right about a love that was never real. Back home, I poured a drink and sat in the dark. The rain tapped on the windows like soft applause. I thought about how easily families dissolve. Not with shouts or affairs or dramatic departures, but with indifference dripped day after day until it fills the room. All those years I tried to buy my way into their hearts, not realizing you can't purchase a place in someone else's story. When I finally went to bed, I dreamed of nothing, just silence. And when I woke to the gray light of morning, I knew I would never see them the same way again. The bill had come due, and they were the ones left to pay it. Months passed like a slow confession. Each day stripped something else away: noise, anger, the illusion of belonging. The house settled into a silence so complete that even the floors stopped creaking. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts without interruption. I woke when I wanted, cooked for one, paid bills that belonged only to me. There was no one to ask for favors, no one to mock the way I folded laundry or salted soup. Freedom, I learned, doesn't come with celebration. It arrives quietly, like a stranger you thought you'd never meet. Christina tried a few more times. The first messages came like apologies wrapped in excuses. Paul left again. The girls are struggling. We can fix this if you just come back. I didn't reply. Then the tone changed. You owe them at least a conversation. I ignored that too. Eventually, her silence became the final proof that she had moved on, or maybe just run out of ways to ask for help. I heard things through neighbors, through whispers at the grocery store. Olivia had dropped out of her dance program. Mia had switched schools. Paul was gone again, leaving behind debts and empty promises. Christina had taken an extra job, working nights at a clinic. People said she looked thinner, older, the kind of tired that sleep can't fix. I felt nothing, or maybe I felt everything at once. A dull ache that had nowhere to go. Sometimes, late at night, I would replay old moments, the dinners, the movie nights, the family vacations where I'd believed we were happy. I'd study those memories like crime scenes, looking for the moment where love turned counterfeit. It was always the same. Their laughter too quick, Christina's eyes glancing toward her phone when Paul texted, the way they posed for pictures with me but never touched. All the signs had been there. I had chosen blindness because it was cheaper than admitting defeat. One evening, as autumn crept in, I received a letter. A real one. Ink, paper. The faint smell of perfume that had once belonged to Christina. The handwriting was shaky, unsure. We're doing better, it said. The girls miss you, especially Mia. She wants to talk. No demands this time. No accusations. Just words that seemed to tremble between guilt and exhaustion. I didn't answer immediately. I left the letter on the table for days, unread except for that single line. I watched the paper curl at the edges from sunlight, and I wondered if regret could be mailed like a bill, sent too late, arriving after the account had closed. Then, one Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Mia stood there. Older now, thinner, quieter. Her eyes carried the same exhaustion I'd seen in Christina's the day we met. She wasn't holding a phone or a bag. Just her hands, clasped in front of her like someone preparing for judgment. "Hi," she said softly. For a long time, I didn't answer. Then, "Does your mother know you're here?" "She knows," Mia said. "She said it was my choice." I stepped aside. She hesitated, then entered, moving carefully as if the walls themselves might reject her. The house smelled of coffee and rain. Familiar, unwelcoming. She looked around, her gaze settling on the empty frames where family photos used to hang. "It's different," she murmured. "It's mine now," I said. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd printed the receipts, where Christina once laughed, where the girls whispered that I wasn't family. The same table, but smaller somehow. "I just wanted to say thank you," Mia began, "for everything you did, for the things I didn't understand back then." I watched her, waiting for the usual excuses, the recycled lines about teenage immaturity. But she didn't hide behind them. "Mom works a lot now," she continued. "Olivia blames her. I blame myself. I think we all thought love was something you owed us." I poured her a cup of coffee she didn't touch. What made you change your mind? She looked up, eyes glistening but steady. When things fell apart, I realized something. Dad used to show up with gifts, but you showed up with time. And time is harder to give. Her words hit like a quiet verdict. For years I'd wanted acknowledgement. Now that it came, it didn't heal anything. It only confirmed the scale of what had been wasted. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I nodded slowly. Seeing isn't enough, Mia. It's living differently that matters. I'm trying, she whispered. We sat in silence after that. The clock ticked. Outside, wind rustled through dry leaves. There was nothing left to say. She finished her untouched coffee, stood, and reached for her coat. Will I ever see you again? She asked. I studied her face, the mix of Christina's features and Paul's eyes, a mirror of everything I'd loved and lost. Maybe, I said, when you stop apologizing for who you used to be. She nodded, tears spilling freely now, and left without another word. I didn't follow. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving the echo of footsteps fading down the walkway. After she was gone, I sat there for a long time, staring at the coffee cup she'd barely touched. The steam had vanished, leaving only the faint ring of residue, a ghost of warmth. I realized that was what remained of us all. Faint rings of what once was, stains that never fully wash away. That night, I went into the garage, opened the old storage chest, and pulled out the folder marked family expenses. Invoice for Paul. The papers were still crisp, untouched. I stared at them for a long time, then fed them one by one into the small fire burning in the metal barrel outside. The pages curled, blackened, turned to ash. Money, time, love, all reduced to smoke rising into a sky that didn't care. When the last ember faded, I stood there alone, the cold air biting at my hands. Somewhere far away, a phone vibrated. Maybe Christina, maybe Mia. I didn't check. Inside, the house was warm again, faintly alive with the smell of burning paper. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and watched the reflection of the flames dance across the glass. They would rebuild, I knew. Maybe not with love, but with necessity. They'd survive because survival is easier when someone else has already paid the price. Olivia would find work, Mia would graduate, Christina would eventually forgive herself for forgiving Paul too many times. They'd learn to live without me the way people learn to walk after amputation, limping but forward. As for me, I had finally learned the difference between sacrifice and self-erasure. I had mistaken endurance for virtue, but endurance without respect is slow suicide. Now the nights are quiet. I still check the locks before bed, not out of fear but habit. Sometimes I catch myself setting a fourth plate at the table before realizing there's no one left to feed. Those moments sting, then pass. Once, I dreamed that Mia was young again, standing in the doorway asking me to drive her to school. In the dream, I said yes. But when I woke, I felt grateful that it was only a dream, because dreams, unlike love, don't send you bills when they end. And now, as I sit here with the hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of wind against the windows, I can finally ask the question that haunts every man who's ever given too much. Was I wrong to stop paying for love? Or was I simply late in learning its true cost?